Welcome to the Innovation Squadcast. If you are looking for a podcast about instructional strategies enhanced by technology, you came to the right place. In our conversations, we will talk with tech experts, share ideas and strategies to help you build your toolbox with tools that you can use in your class immediately.
Welcome to Innovation Squadcast. Thanks for making us part of your educational PD journey. First-time listeners, welcome, and for our returning listeners, welcome back. We are glad you're here. Today, we are discussing best practices using Schoology 2023. And so in this episode, we're going to discuss some of the best practices and considerations when using Schoology to maximize the learning management system to its fullest potential. We'll highlight features that can enhance the teacher, parent, and student experience. Before we get started, let's pause for this week's tech tip.
Today's quick tip is on masking images in Google Slides. If you've ever wanted to fit an image into a shape in Google Slides, you can do that. All you have to do is click on the image itself, and you'll see the crop icon at the top, but there's a little drop-down arrow to the right. So if you hover over it, it says Mask Image. I'm going to click on that little drop-down, and I'm going to choose a different shape. Let's say in this case, I want to do a circle or an oval. As soon as I click that shape, it will crop it for me. And then I can click off of it, and it's the shape that you want it to be. If you want to resize it, you can always do exactly like you would any other shape and grab from the corner and drag and put it wherever you would like.
Hope everybody enjoyed that tech tip. I'm Jimmy Kate.
I'm Pam Hubler.
Phil Sharon.
And we are discussing Schoology best practices 2023, things that we've seen, from teachers working with teachers on the Schoology help chat, feedback, and also working with Schoology as it's an evolving system and something that's growing and continuing to change. And so we wanted to highlight some of the things that are going on, some of the changes we've seen, and then also some of the best kind of practices and considerations to really maximize its potential and get students in there, get parents also getting in there, and how really kind of, seeing how it can benefit that experience, because it can be a really great parent experience. And the feedback that I've heard from some of the parents that are using it has been very, very positive. So that's great. And so the first place we wanted to start with was the flagging and how that has changed and evolved since the beginning when we started using it, a couple of years ago until what's going on with it right now.
Yeah. So it used to be, it started out a few years ago when we were using Schoology that it was just hexagons, I say the little hexagons,
right.
3 of them. And those 3 hexagons were in Power Teacher available as well, not in hexagon shape, but they had little icons next to them. And they transferred and they behaved as the same in both places. But, we consistently heard, well, what about all the other ones like absent and it's collected or it's late?
Right.
So just recently, we saw those exceptions, as it's called in Schoology, roll out. And they're now visible when you're in your Schoology gradebook and you go to put a grade in, that lower left-hand portion, lower left corner of a cell for where the grade would go. When you click there, you see those 6 exceptions appear. And I think what is important to know about the intent behind exceptions is it really is best used to support like the workflow
right.
of your collecting getting assignments and grading. Okay. Right. On the day you're collecting an assignment, if a student's absent, you can mark it absent.
Right.
But when you go to put a grade in, if you have a if you have an absent policy or you have whatever, that's a note for you so that as you are able to then put that grade in there, you have that indicator, an exception that shows it was absent. Right. Might mean nothing, but at least you have that for your knowledge if needed.
Right.
When the grade goes in, absent goes away.
Right.
And some, teachers have said, well, geez, I would like that to stay there. If you do need that continue to stay there, look to the lower right-hand corner, and that's the comment area. Yes. So if you really do need the absent to stay in there as a note for you as a teacher, you can just type absent. If you don't need the student or parent to see it, you don't have to check the box that says display to student. If for whatever reason you do want it to be visible to the student, the parent in the Schoology gradebook, as well as visible in Power School for student/parent, then you need to make sure you hit
Right.
display to student
Yeah.
so it'll transfer.
I love that feature too, because I know even for my own child who's in high school, there might be like, let's say he ended up getting, I don't know, like a 50 on something,
Yep.
but it just says a 50. I can't see any more information. If a comment was in there,
Yeah.
then that would be really nice to be able to say, well, or it was late
Mm-hmm.
and they lost points, or absent, or maybe just study harder. That comment feature, I think, can be really valuable for all people involved.
And you do have to have that. So to piggyback off what you just said, if we jump to the bottom of that list of exceptions, late is one in there.
Right.
So the day of collecting papers, let's say Jimmy, he is not absent. He's right in front of me, but he does not turn his assignment in. It is therefore late.
That would never happen.
No,
you picked the wrong person.
Handed it in on time.
I handed it in early.
Yeah, with everything else for the week. But you would want to be able to indicate with that exception that it's late, so that when it is turned in, if I do have a policy on late, it's whatever it is, let's say it's a 10-point deduction. When I'm at the point where I am grading that assignment, I have that exception there that I can then consider to say, oh, well, Jimmy, that was a really great assignment. You would have got 100, but it was late. Right in there. But you do have to, if you want that comment as to why it wasn't 100, you do have to type in late.
Right.
Hit display to student.
Gotcha.
Some teacher feedback has been, boy, I wish it would stay there. It's understandable, but really the intention of those exception flags is really just to help you in the workflow of
Gotcha.
The grading that goes on.
And we've got a resource in the show notes, so definitely check out the show notes. This comes directly from PowerSchool and how the flagging work or the exceptions as they call them, and definitely check those out.
One more thing with the flagging, if you do want to take it off, you have to click on that exception again and click it, so that way it's not clicked anymore. Right. So then you can put a grade in. I've had some teachers say, well, how do I get rid of it? You just have to unclick it.
And then one other note about the collected exception there is, if you are in your materials and you're creating an assignment, you will now see that there is an option right by where it says sync desist, the little checkbox there. There's a new checkbox that says code, like collected.
Right.
And if you check off that, you then have no ability to put a grade in for it when you're looking at it in your grade book. What my thought as to why they introduced that feature was, in the past, teachers would say, well, I have a parent letter.
Right.
I need to know if it was collected or not. I need them to do it. If I mark it ungraded, it doesn't
show
grade
anywhere.
book. I have no means of accounting for that. So that would be an appropriate use of that little checkbox when you create that, quote unquote assignment for the students to do. And then when you're in the grade book, if you look right under the assignment name, it would say code only. Right. Meaning there's no point value to it, but it would allow you to go ahead and mark each of them collected with that collected exception flag. So that is a nice feature.
Absolutely.
That is nice, because you don't necessarily want to punish kids. I mean, especially I've done it myself for my own child, where it's like, oh wait, they got a bad grade on that because I didn't sign something. It was my fault, not theirs. So it is nice to have a collected option.
And that collected option does do dual purpose as well. Even on graded assignments, you can still use it. It's really awesome to be able to see, kids are handing in a paper-based assignment, nothing that was collected in Schoology. They're handing it in, and you have the ability to just check collected. So prior to them leaving the class, you can do a quick scan down through your grade book and see who did not get collected.
Nice.
So again, that workflow helping, trying to add a tool in there to support it.
Perfect. Some of the other things that we've wanted to highlight as far as best practices is the ideas of dropping lowest grade. What are the kind of alternatives when it comes to dropping lowest grade, and then factoring as well. So what would you recommend when it comes to kind of dropping lowest grades and factoring?
So it's hard to say a recommendation. I think this is definitely like a things to consider topic when we talk about
considerations. Probably a better word than recommendations.
It's hard. Your recommendations. We're trying to make recommendations in a very wide spectrum.
Right.
So, and each teacher kind of has a different way. But to consider, when you're dropping the lowest grades, Schoology and PowerSchool are going to behave in the same way, and how the system kind of automates that process. So let's say today my lowest grade as a student is a 60. That'll be dropped out of the calculation. Okay, that number is not going to be impacting me. And then tomorrow, my lowest grade is a 40.
Right.
Well, now it's that.
So it shifted. Yeah.
You kind of roller coaster the student performance a little bit more so than if you just left it off.
Right.
It's hard to see too from the kid's perspective or parent. You can't tell what's being dropped.
Yep.
So it is kind of challenging.
In the Schoology grade report, it puts a line through, I think, and then in the Power School one, I used to gray it out. I think it's still it'll be kind of a grayed out feature. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky one though if you are, we find ourselves in this role a lot, trying to help teachers to hand calculate scores to verify things, and it's can be a tricky one.
It's also when you're again zooming out and thinking about the parent and teacher experience. Sometimes that's where this can cause some miscommunications that were unintended. So
the other thing to consider too is okay, so Jimmy is a high performing student, and he's pretty consistent. He's always getting in the 90s, and
you can use me as the other one.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I was actually going to use it for the other one. So next time we'll do it different. So say Jimmy's always consistently in the 90s, and a low grade for Jimmy's like a 91.
Right.
But
that's more like
you're inconsistent as a student, Pam, and you are going to reap the better benefit of the dropping lowest because you have a bad day, whatever that reason may be. Dropping out something like a 20 or a 30 out of your grade book really helps to keep you afloat.
Yes.
What's Jimmy getting out of this? Really nothing. So again, it's just the things to consider. How does it behave, and what is it really doing?
Right.
Versus something like at the end of the quarter to say to students, "Here's your opportunity to improve." Now, Jimmy might need No, Jimmy would.
No.
If you give him a chance to improve something,
Yes, I
even
probably
a 90 something,
Yes.
you do it. But some kids might be like, I'm good. I've had it pretty good, and it's up to you, the student, to decide I'm going to do better. I'm going to take that bad day that I had, that 40 that I got, and I'm going to do a redo on it because my teacher gave me that opportunity. And then I'll turn it in, and then the teacher determines, hey, I'll give you the new grade that you earned. So instead of just dropping things out, consider having redos and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
because being able to see how those grades affect your overall grade, that's a huge thing for a kid to know. Okay, well, I really need to step it up in my tests and quizzes or that kind of a thing. So
it's ownership. If you don't like that grade, how do you push that accountability back to the student to give them that choice to say, I want to do better.
Yeah.
And like you just said, Schoology's grade report is great.
It is.
You can look exactly at that breakdown and see what's harming you the most. And again, push it back on the kids. How do we do this? What do you want to do?
Right. I have a conversation with my child all the time where it's like, look, okay, you got 90 something in classwork, but it's only worth 20% of your grade.
Yeah.
Or a test and quiz is worth 40% of your grade. And if you only have a couple, then it really affects your grade.
Sure.
So,
and these students are smart and they'll figure it out. And especially if you're dropping stuff, they'll, I remember I was in the classroom and we had project due and the kid's like, well, you dropped the lowest one anyways, right? So they're like not putting their full effort in. And I'm like, well, then that's kind of, you're defeating the purpose of this because, this is designed for you to learn something from. And if you
for the next thing,
right.
Because it's scaffolds.
Yeah. So if they kind of have, behind it to get because they know that something's going to be dropped, especially when you get towards the end of the quarter, they've done really great on everything. This last one, well, I don't have to do that great because I know it's going to get dropped. And definitely, Yep. So what about factoring? What are some of the better alternatives when considering factoring?
Factoring is kind of one of our mathematical nemesis.
Yes.
That's a word. When it comes to trying to figure out, how's this kid got a score like this?
Right.
Because factoring is really an invisible numerical mathematical.
So you really got to click into the assignments to find that.
And really, we can see it and the teachers can get in and see it, but students never see it.
No.
Parents never see it. So if you have an assignment, a test, we see it a lot with a project,
major project or something like that.
I want it to be double factored. I want it to go twice. There is no indicator for a student or a parent to see that it was happening that way.
Like that.
So you're kind of weighting inside of an already weighted category,
Right.
which is, again, I think the best thing teachers can do when it comes to grading, again, an opinion here, but keep it as simple as you can.
Right.
Simple, effective, and transparent, letting the student know where they are as a learner, the parents seeing how well they're doing, and the teacher to see, hey, here's my grades. And as a teacher, whole class, this data can support my next step.
Right.
And it can help me to support the individual student as well. But try to keep it as simple as you can.
Right.
Yeah.
And factoring can make for a lot of complicated stuff.
Correct. But if they do want to factor, what would be the correct step?
So factoring that numerical factor that you put in, let's say you double factor something in Schoology, because we always start there and create, and we say factor 2.
Right.
When you sync, the factor doesn't carry over.
Okay.
So what you do need to do is go over to Power Teacher, and you need to edit that assignment, and you need to have there's a weight option.
Okay.
They call it weight on the assignment. You need to hit add a weight, and you need to put that
same factor in there. Perfect.
And again, this is something you definitely, if you're listening to this podcast, like, what? I don't understand this.
Yeah.
Best to get on
the help chat
desk and say, can you clarify for me?
Sure.
Because this will mess up your calculations.
Right.
So kind of, finishing off that last thought, extra credit, what would be kind of the best consideration when it comes to, extra credit in the classroom?
I think I kind of take it back to like what I said about considering the dropping, extra credit. The reality is kids will never get over 100, on the report card.
Right.
So they may do every opportunity that you give them to do extra credit. And, by the time the end of the quarter gets around, if they have 110,
right,
it's going to be 100.
Right. Because Power School doesn't like that. So
it doesn't, and I think it's there to try to support those that may struggle to achieve. But, things like allowing them to improve things that you did for them, those assignments, everybody does. I would like to think that every assignment that's put in front of a student is there for
a reason,
purpose,
right? Yes.
Right. So if you did something, if you took the time to create something that you thought was a valuable tool for them in learning or an experience, and they didn't do well, as opposed to creating another experience for them to do, why not let them relook at the one that you had them do the first place? Less work for the teacher. So I think that's something to consider with extra credit.
I do like the transparency of extra credit, because I've seen a couple teachers give one, like, let's say, okay, first 9 weeks extra credit. In Schoology, you put it as, 10 points out of 0. So it doesn't count against anyone. But then me as a parent, I can look at it and say, well, my child has a 75 average. Why did you not do any extra credit? You don't have any extra credit here.
Right.
So you can also see how much they're really trying to improve their grade. And it kind of gives them that place where you can always do this. And whether it's a choice board, these are the things you can do for extra credit at any time during the 9 weeks. I wouldn't give a ton of credit for it. Like, you're not going to be doing 50 points of extra credit. But if you've got that, every 9 weeks, giving them a little option for like 10 points overall, it might be that difference between a C and a D, so I think it can be helpful if you're not already allowing kids to just redo an assignment to get more points on it originally.
To improve it.
I liked it as a motivator for like games and things like that. Here's 5 points, and I just gave them a little token, and then they could turn that 5 points in on something, but I'm not going to make an extra assignment. You can add it to something. You can't go over 100, right? But just in case you need that little extra bump on something, I never want.
I think, and
to gamify it a little bit,
the things to consider is, if I teach, 7th grade science, and you teach 7th grade science, am I doing the same thing that you're doing?
Right.
Or do I, with my dropping lowest practices and my factoring practices and my extra credit practices, what does that create for my students as far as the opportunity to do well? So I think there's that needs to be considered, and as a team, as a PLC or something, you need to think,
at least have that discussion.
And you can even go so far as to say, well, how does that compare to other schools, especially in our high schools?
Right.
Is there a harder, is there a big spectrum
Right.
of difficulty as we would look at a particular, chemistry, high school chemistry,
Right.
So just as long as there's intentionality to it and it supports the teacher in giving them data to best understand their students and then understand themselves as teachers and what they need to do. Great.
It's about learning at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So kind of moving out of the grading realm a little bit, but moving into some of just the other best practices and things like that. And one thing that we've seen is the submission button, right? That's when you're creating that assignment and, if you're something that you want them to turn in on Schoology, leave that submission button on. It's at the very bottom in the options row. It looks like a little kind of like box, basically, a drop box, yes, with a little arrow in it. It's defaulted on. So just think about it that way, that it is defaulted on, and that, if you're having it, collecting it, right? Because there's some benefits to collecting things, putting things in portfolios, having a digital copy, things like that. But if you're not, right, it's a project, they've created it, they're going to, however you're going to, assess it. But if it's not something they're going to turn in, it's a good idea to turn it off. And why, I guess, is the reason to turn it off. What does it do when it's on and it's not off? Yeah.
The big why is, as parents sign up for Parent Digest emails, or they're just checking on their students, and students are even looking at like what's overdue or not submitted, back to the project, if the project's like completely and entirely a non-digital thing, it's a diorama that they made,
right?
And you're not going to have them do anything to digitally kind of like capture that. By leaving that on as it is defaulted, once the date that you set for that being due goes past, if there's nothing turned in, then it's showing up as late,
right?
We're not done. So
which is frustrating for kids,
and parents,
especially kids like Jimmy.
Yeah,
right?
I want that off. I know
that's a false indicator. It's like, what's this? It's the questioning your kid about something they don't need to be questioned about, right? Nobody needs to do that. So consider that it's always on, and I do think there's a value in always having something that the kids turn in. Even if if I handed in my diorama,
right?
I could at minimum say, as a student, submitted assignment, and then just put my own little timestamp on it. I turned it in on.
Yep.
And that way a student has a record of it.
Right. Because you can just put a comment and submit a comment in there. You can submit pictures, you can do files, you can do even an audio video recording. So there's lots of different ways that you can, kind of have that timestamp.
I think pushing it back on the kids, saying, you turn it in, you make a note, and then, it's in the world of adults, we have to cover ourselves.
Yeah. And I think the portfolio feature is something that I would have loved, because I have had portfolios already created in sites, but having it right here in Schoology where they can just put their picture of whatever they made, because we created a lot of things, and then be able to attach it right to their portfolio is a great way to be able to highlight that. So definitely take advantage of that, and check out the previous Schoology podcast where we talked about we talked about portfolios. And then kind of last two things, adding, talking about assignment details, and Pam, you were talking about this, is as far as the parent perspective, you're more in it than mine. Mine's still in first grade, so not quite using it quite there, but and both of you have students in high school, and that parent perspective as far as adding assignment details, talk about why that's an important thing for the parent, the student, and again as a teacher, highlighting the learning management part.
I think the ones that I've noticed that the teachers give a lot of details as far as what the students have to do in the description window is nice, even if you can't see their assignment, because a lot of them you can't see what your kid's assignment actually is.
Right.
But if it's in the details, then you at least have a general idea of what they're going to have to turn in. And then to go along with that submission button, then I know if there's something that's supposed to be, or even if it just says, project on paper or something like that, then I know it's not something that my kid is going to have to turn in.
Right.
They turn it in physically. So it gives you again, more transparency and how parents can help their kids. The kids might even need a reminder because the teacher said it in class, what this is going to be. And then they're like, I don't remember.
Right.
Oh, we did that in class. It's not really late.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Did you really do it?
Yeah.
Because I have no evidence of it,
And thinking about it from teacher's perspective, as as I take this course and I push it out and copy it, and then I bring it back in next year, having those details and as much information to say, okay, this is what we did. This is what I like. This is what I didn't like. Here's how I'm going to revise and reflect and change. Or this went really great. We don't have to make any changes, right? Just bring it in and add the due date and attachments and you're good to go. So I think from that standpoint, bringing in as much information for you to remember what you did, a year ago, I think is an important part as well. So
if you want to reuse it, it's easy to reuse previous materials from previous years in Schoology. But the other piece too in the details is not only just writing a description as to saying what's being done and what needs to be turned in and when does it need to be turned in, all that, but any attachment.
Attachments.
A link to a video. I mean, there's a lot of times I'd love to help my kids, but I know that if I go about trying to use, YouTube, greatest tool ever, to then support how we're solving equations or whatever in math. I mean, the YouTube video I watched to help my daughter
could be
might
different.
not align with how the teachers
want to do it.
And I don't want to confuse an already confused child.
Right.
And they never really seem to enjoy.
Who loves listening to dad? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, having that there as a parent to see it for a parent that wants to help is great.
And everything in that description window would be there next year. The same links, the same videos. You'd be able to check them. You can put your own audio and video instructions in there as well. So if you can put an example of how to solve that equation, that resource is ready to go.
Or a PDF of the thing that you sent home that is probably still shoved in the bottom of a backpack.
Right.
Then mom or dad can be like, hey, we're going to print that right now and you're going to do it again.
Yep.
Yeah. The only thing you have to redo every year if you reuse an assignment is just we're giving it a new due date, categorize it, things that would make sense.
Or anything you're making a copy for and that format options. But other than that, everything else stays. So that's a huge resource.
Do it once, do it well, and reuse, refine, build on it, make it better. But
Perfect. And then last but not least, bulk editor tips. That's definitely one of the places I know that, people that come on the help chat, that's where we like to go right away is check that bulk editor. What are some of the tips that, teachers and, can look at when you're looking at the bulk editor?
I think my favorite is just to be able to see where you can look in one place, if everything has a category, everything has a due date, how many points you have it out of, if it's in the right quarter. It's just an easy place to be able to check in one spot that everything is where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's essentially the equivalent of in Power Teacher, the assignment
list. Yeah.
But you get a lot more details.
Right.
Like you said, weight and or the factor.
Right.
The points aligned,
point total,
category you put it in, and the due date, and all that stuff. And right from there, you can quickly and easily change that.
Right.
In Power Teacher, you have to click on Edit Assignment, which is on like 1-point font. You can barely see it.
That's always a hard one for us to point out.
Yeah, so it's way more efficient to do the bulk editor. And make any adjustments or check for anything in there.
Yeah, and you can switch between classes. I do like that you can use that little notebook up at the top right-hand side, switch between classes and check all of them. And it only shows the ones that are active at the time. That, and then...
We definitely recommend doing the uncheck sync desist at the end of a quarter. That really also helps out. I think why I would do it is because it really removes that in your sync log in your grade book. It it shows opt out for all the assignments that... because we all agree that the sync log needs some changes, and that's something that we're hoping will evolve with Schoology over time and how they structure that thing. But by go ahead and unchecking that sync desist for everything from quarter one or previous quarters, those are going to show opted out, and then only the live and active assignments would be showing up in your sync log. So that's just a good way, number one, to make sure we don't make any changes in Power Teacher and get that nasty email. And then also making sure that, it also cleans up that sync log. I think it was a big part of doing that uncheck sync desist, which again is that right checkbox. So
and it can speed up the sync process too.
Yep.
As long as that button is checked in the process of syncing Schoology, looking at scanning your gradebook, anything, check sync desist, it looks at it, makes sure there's no changes, and then goes. So it helps to keep things pretty quick.
And then making sure that things are published. That's the other thing that, if there is a grade assigned to it, make sure to always keep it published.
Yeah, because
you can hide it in a folder. But keep it published.
We don't want to unpublish anything that's a grade because that removes it from the student grade book. It'll show up in your grade book and it looks like it's there, but it actually removes it from the parent and teacher version and view. And so they're not going to be able to see it. So it's definitely going to create a discrepancy there. We don't want to.
And I think that too, even though we didn't have it on our list of things, but the intentionality that they have behind the publish unpublished button
Mhm.
is to support kind of workflow.
Right.
You know, teachers are getting things ready ahead of time for the kids. They don't want them to see it.
Right.
They want it unpublished. But as soon as the kids have seen it, and like Jimmy said, especially once you give a grade to it, don't unpublish it.
Right.
If you need to have it be not visible, quote unquote, visible to kids, and we have strategies to help
Right.
with
Mhm.
that.
Yep.
But do not use the unpublished, the little green button. It's got to
Mhm.
stay active.
Yeah, that's just for
Yeah.
building, like you said, building out your course and,
Yeah.
and putting things ahead of time and
Yeah.
before you roll them out. So,
Mhm.
all right.
Yeah.
I really appreciate everybody
That was a
being
lot.
here. That
Yeah,
was a
that was a
lot.
lot.
That was a lot. So definitely reach out to your ILC. Check out the show notes. We got some resources there that you're going to be able to click into. We got a link to the podcast video. We got a link to the tech tip video. Search for the Innovation Squadcast on Unified Talent, or we have a link in the show notes as well. So you can get credit for every 2 episodes. You get 1 renewal credit. This is, we're getting up there. A lot of people are getting some serious hours lately. So it's been really nice. So don't forget to subscribe on the podcast on YouTube or Spotify so you get notifications of new episodes. And we want to hear from you. We want your podcast topics. We want you to be on the podcast. So if there's something that you want, you got Schoology tech tips and trips that tech tips and tricks out there. We want you on here. We want to hear from you guys. We want you guys explaining how you guys are using it to benefit, again, the teachers and students and parents in Berkeley Catholic School District. So thank you guys for being here. Thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Bye.